This is October the 7th, the one-year anniversary of the terrorist attack by Hamas on southern Israel, in which 1,200 people tragically lost their lives. It was also a day a number of hostages were taken, many of whom have still not been returned or not home. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, host of the Foreign Desk, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, October the 7th is a day the world will not soon forget.
No, it doesn't seem like. Well, the war is still raging on, but obviously so many families affected by this throughout the region. But when you look inside Israel to start, so many families, an entire generation really will have PTSD, suffering, whether they know someone, whether they have a family member, whether their own family was just torn apart by this war, by this conflict. So many of the hostages still remain in captivity 1 year into this war, and many of the bodies have not been returned. I have interviewed a family here in Los Angeles. Their uncle was one of the older hostages taken, and we now know that he has been killed by Hamas in captivity, but they have yet to lay him to rest because they still have not retrieved the body from the terror group. It's horrific, Hal, because when you look around the world and you see these pro-Hamas and pro-Hezbollah protests on the streets of Canada and the United States and Europe, and you just think about the Middle East, where you have moderate Arab voices, moderate Muslim voices, where you have them unified with Israel because they understand the consequences of allowing terrorism and the rhetoric and the brainwashing and the radicalization into their societies. And here we are in the West having allowed it to penetrate into our societies and our universities and our institutions and our media. So yes, 1 year has passed, but we have so much more work ahead of us to truly root out not just Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and the Islamic Republic in Iran, but to root out the effects, the influence campaigns, the individuals, the spies, the influence that they have here on us in the West.
Lisa, Israel is such a small nation. How are they able to handle not only all of the proxy wars with Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, as you just mentioned, but also with Iran? Will we see peace anytime again soon?
From the beginning of its establishment as a state, and juxtapose that with the beginning of the Islamic Republic in Iran 45 years ago. They toppled the Shah of Iran, and they came into place. They swore on two enemies: the big Satan, the United States; the little Satan, as you said, the size of New Jersey, Israel, which is right in its backyard. And it has been hell bent on really pushing Israel off the map, and as well as going after U.S. assets. I mean, we have seen only during if you want to start with Carter, who was the U.S. president who was friendly with and helped usher in the Islamic Republic, but you had President Obama and President Biden being really the two that stand out in the past few decades as administrations that have been friendly with an administration that has not been friendly with the United States, that has American blood on its hands, that has been working to really undo the Judeo-Christian values of the West. And now we see many of the effects here today, but this has been something that has been in the works for decades. Will there be peace anytime soon? Look, for Israel, it's security and safety to protect itself against the many fronts it is fighting right now, whether it's Hezbollah or Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad or the Houthis, or now direct threats coming from the Islamic Republic. Its security and safety is a 24/7 job. It has to commit itself. It has to commit its technology, its military might, all to defense. Not offense, but defense. And when you look at the Islamic Republic, again, when the charter of Hamas, the charter of Hezbollah, and the charter of the Islamic Republic is to destroy the infidel, to destroy its enemies, well, they're going to be at it for many years to come. I think Golda Meir was the one who said, if we put down our weapons, meaning the Israelis put down their weapons, there will be no Israel. And, but if the other side puts down their weapons, there will be peace. And I butchered that quote, but the sentiment is there to say that, there can never be peace until this ideology exists to destroy and to kill people just because of their faith.
Now, speaking of peace, Lisa, what's the latest between Ukraine and Russia? I mean, are Ukrainian President Zelensky and Russian President Putin ready to sit down now and discuss an end to this war, which has claimed so many lives?
So many lives, such a senseless war, and I cannot believe it's been raging on for so long as it has. The Ukraine war will continue, and I believe it is tied into, like many other things, the election that we're going to have here in the United States. I don't think it's going to have any kind of off ramp or detour or any kind of ceasefire anytime soon. Not only that, but we're talking about more escalations. We're talking about the conversation now revolves around will they use nuclear weapons, not will they sit down to have a conversation. And that's very unfortunate. As we know, there have been many casualties. We did a story here at the Foreign Desk this week where Putin is actually pardoning felons. So instead of doing jail time, they can serve in his military. This is the way that he's trying to increase the draft, increase those who are serving their nation. We know many Ukrainians, Hal, you and I talked about this off air, Ukrainians who aren't leaving Ukraine. They want to stay back. They want to fight. They have that national pride. By the same token, I have interviewed Ukrainians who think, let Russia just do what it has to do. We're not going to get out of this. We might as well just live under one flag. I know that that's not the opinion across the board, but it is an opinion that exists. With Russians, not all of them are backing Putin, and some of them are. Obviously, their economy is suffering. There are so many consequences to this very senseless conflict, and when we'll see an end to it, I think it's going to be months to come, if not years.
Lisa, let's talk about the war in Lebanon for just a moment here. The Israel Defense Forces have reportedly hit 150 Hezbollah targets in 24 hours during its ground operations in southern Lebanon. And we've seen some video as well from other reports which show specifically that a lot of the missile silos are set up in apartment complexes where civilians are in Lebanon. These Hezbollah missile silos, it's unbelievable that they're setting up in an area and making, a lot of the civilians targets.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yeah, sounds familiar, doesn't it? It's really from the same handbook. We saw the same thing with Hamas. Obviously, the area in which in Gaza where Hamas has built its tunnels, where it's hiding the hostages, where it's putting weapons in schools and mosques and other centers, much more population dense. So we saw a lot of, casualties there among civilians, although there was a report that came out in the last 24 hours that is now showing that of the maybe 30, 40,000 casualties, and I hate to cite a number on the casualties in Gaza because we don't have a straight number. It's coming from Hamas. Among the casualties, they are saying that a majority of them were Hamas operatives or their family members. So, as the days go on, we'll get more and more, facts about this war. But in Lebanon, to your point, Lebanon is not an enemy nation, and Lebanon is only the body where this cancerous cell of Hezbollah is and has taken over. One of the things that many of us have been championing and trying to advocate for and write about to our government is that when we do give aid money to Lebanon, we should make it contingent so that the Lebanese army allows the Christians and others who are freedom-seeking Lebanese people to nation build and get rid of Hezbollah. But this has never happened. This is something that we had to have paid attention to rid Hezbollah. But again, that goes back to U.S. policy and actually focusing on diminishing the Islamic Republic's might in the region and not empowering them, which has not happened. But back to Lebanon. A lot of people getting out of harm's way. I know the United States has evacuated its personnel there. They have told people to get out. Whoever can get out is getting out. And although there are many people who cannot get out, these are the consequences to having these radical elements inside your nation. And the Lebanese people know that. It's interesting. We don't see an overwhelming support. And on the contrary, there is actually an opposition force to Hezbollah inside Lebanon that is quite strong and quite vocal. And again, these are the elements with which many people in the Middle East innocent people in the Middle East have to live. And again, when you put that side by side with the college students wearing the Hezbollah garb from head to toe, it makes you really scratch your head.
And Hezbollah's presumed new leader is missing following an airstrike by the IDF. Now, this follows an attack by the Israeli military in which Hezbollah's previous leader was killed in another airstrike in Beirut on September the 27th.
Right. So now, if many of you have seen some of these memes on social media, where this is like the quickest turnaround for somebody to hold head of state, because the Hezbollah leaders are being taken out hours after they take office. So they keep replacing the head of Hezbollah, and a lot of their leaders have been killed. Look, I think we're seeing a very different approach by Israel than we saw in April. April was when the Iran regime hit Israel. No harm, no foul, right? So the apparatuses that Israel has, its technology, was able to protect Israel. So of the hundreds of missiles that came in, there was hardly any damage, very, very minimal damage. And so Israel, perhaps coerced by the West and by the Biden administration, turned the other way, and said, you know what, we'll turn the other cheek, and we'll allow this one to go unnoticed. And there wasn't really any sort of defined retaliation from that hit. This time around, we're seeing a very different Israel. An Israel that knows it has to take matters into its own hands and eliminate the threat coming from Lebanon, or that will be another full-on war, which it has turned into. But they will take the upper hand and continue on this streak of eliminating very, very targeted attacks on Hezbollah assets, Hezbollah headquarters, and their leaders. If you recall the pager attack, then we went to the walkie-talkies, and now we're looking at very, very targeted attacks on their infrastructure. So doing the best they can. It's like playing whack-a-mole, right? We know that these terror groups really build in a way where, if one dies, the other one takes over, and they have so many volunteers. And as we had said months before, the Hamas war will look like child's play in comparison to the Hezbollah war, because they are better endowed, they have more missiles, they have more capability, and they have more fighters. So here we are.
Now, military experts here in the West, Lisa, say the best way to cripple Iran is to cut off their oil supply, which provides the funds to support the many wars with Israel. The Islamic Republic's own oil minister is concerned now that the Jewish state may attack Iran's main petroleum export terminal.
Right. If you live in a glass house, you shouldn't throw stones, as I think the adage goes. Look, it's like the Islamic Republic did its best to launch hundreds of missiles into Israel. Obviously, they know there will be a retaliation, and now they're worried about their nuclear sites and their oil sites. When we talk about their oil sites, Hal, if you recall, under President Trump, love him or hate him, he had very, very tight sanctions on Iran's banking system and weapons basically their ability to acquire weapons, and also, of course, their oil sectors. They were not allowed to sell oil or collect money on the oil that they were selling. And now we see an about face. In the 3 years, almost 4 years that Biden has been in office, they have sold $100 billion worth of oil to partners like China and Russia and North Korea and Venezuela. And now, here we are trying to play catch up. The money that they were able to collect went right into terrorism, to Hezbollah's pockets, Hamas's pockets, the Houthis' pockets. And here we are trying to catch up with this, right? So the United States prides itself on catching, or blocking against Houthi hits in the Red Sea. Wouldn't it have been better not to allow them to take that first shot, right? But that's when we talk about oil, we talk about the sanctions being very important. And really, Hal, to your point and to the beginning of your question, the most important thing here is to want to curb the Islamic Republic in Iran. Once we get an administration that could be on the same page about wanting to curb them, there are multiple ways to really diminish the threat that is coming from Iran's regime.
Let's talk about the potential threats here in North America, Lisa. A new report by the U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security says that foreign jihadist networks and homegrown violent extremists represent a persistent and terrible threat. Now, the study says there are more than 50 jihadist cases in 29 states right now.
Right. It's all over. We know that we're very ripe for another 9/11 type attack. And I hate saying that. I don't want to be a fear monger. I hope it never happens. And I hope that I'm very wrong. But for many reasons, obviously, we see this ideology throughout. It has been very, very, just confusing in some ways, again, to see Hezbollah fighters or people who support Hezbollah on the streets of New York and LA and in Montreal and Toronto. It's unusual, and I know many people have the conversation of, if there were to be another 9/11 attack, would there be supporters out on the streets cheering on the terrorists? Because it seems that that's what's happening, right? If they're supporting the terrorists in this manner, that would be the way that it would be under those circumstances. We also have a very open border. We know for a fact that there are people from certain parts of the world that are coming to the border, and it's not just South and Central America. We know that there have been Taliban fighters, ISIS fighters, Hezbollah fighters, Hamas fighters, people from the Islamic Republic that have been captured at the border. Now, think about the ones who got away, right? There have been individuals who have been on the FBI's most wanted list. There have been individuals who have been on the foreign terror designation list. That's why we think that we are ripe for an attack. Today is October 7th. There has been additional alerts that have been issued specifically for today in some of our largest cities, that there might be attacks, that there may be, and we saw already protesters gathered around the Museum of Tolerance here in Los Angeles. Last night, there was an October 7th event, and there were many violent protesters on the streets, throwing punches, breaking glass, trying to be extremely violent. And here we are. When the ideology is there, when we know that they have the useful idiots here, when we know that they're being funded by the Islamic Republic right here, when our protesters, when our college students are being funded by the Islamic Republic to do their encampments and to do their protesting, why wouldn't they orchestrate an attack here on U.S. soil?
She's our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari. Thanks again for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Hal.